I've had a question about this issue, and some of this might be familiar to us. We've talked about this issue before in another context, but I want to talk about it in this context today to be different. If you look at the 10 Commandments, you'll see that the 6th commandment says, "Thou shalt not kill." And that's all it says, "Thou shalt not kill." But both in Christianity and in Judaism, both, that has been traditionally seen as referring only to human beings. It has not been seen as referring to animals. So "thou shalt not kill" means human beings, and that's the way it's traditionally been interpreted. Now there's another point of controversy about that. Depending on what Bible translation you use, if you're reading that, you may see "thou shalt not murder." And so is it kill or is it murder? There's a difference between kill and murder. To murder means that you kill somebody without justification. So I've seen the arguments around whether that should be "thou shalt not kill" or "thou shalt not murder." They revolve around how certain words are translated into English in this passage, and those words are found in the Greek in both the Old Testament and the New. Now, some believe this commandment is not talking about all instances of killing, it's just murder. And some say it's talking about all instances of killing another human being. So which is it? Does it prohibit absolutely the killing of another human being? It's impossible to know, just from looking at the text itself. You have to realize that in ancient languages like Koine Greek, they were not nearly as advanced as our English is. They had a lot fewer words, and a lot of their words did double, triple, or quadruple duty, and you had to pay attention to the context sometimes to see what was meant. And I don't think it's possible for us today to know what the biblical authors mean. So we'll leave that as an open question. But the reason people think it should be murder rather than kill is the way our society looks at killing. In general, we believe it's wrong to kill people. You just can't walk out here on the street and start killing people. If somebody makes you mad in the checkout line at Walmart, you can't just kill them. But there are some instances where you can. If you're sitting at home one night and somebody comes busting through your front door with a shotgun, if you get to your gun first, you can kill them, and nothing will happen to you. If someone grabs you in a parking lot and tries to put a knife to your throat, and if you can pull out your gun first and shoot them, that's okay. You can legally kill someone if necessary to protect yourself or others. Now that doesn't only apply to individuals. Society itself has the right in certain situations to kill someone. Some states have the death penalty, and if you are convicted of certain crimes, you can be executed. Our law enforcement has the authority to kill people if necessary. A little over 1,000 people are killed by law enforcement each year. And that's really not a lot when you consider that the United States has well over 300 million people in it. And so we see the circumstances you can legally kill someone. We see the circumstances that society can legally kill someone. They're limited though. This tells us that our society believes that killing other human beings should be done only in exceptional circumstances. In limited situations, killing people is acceptable. And so we do not believe killing people is absolutely wrong. It's generally wrong, but there are situations in which you can kill someone. That's what's called situational ethics. And when you're looking to see whether something is right or wrong, if you're going on situational ethics, you will take the circumstances into consideration. the situation into consideration in deciding on what is right and wrong. Something could be right in one situation but wrong in another. And whether it is right or wrong depends on that particular situation. That is situational ethics. Lying is something that we often interpret according to situational ethics. In general, we believe lying is wrong. If somebody says, "Do I look fat?" I hope you'll lie and say, "Oh man, you look nice." Because you don't want to tell somebody they look fat and hurt their feelings. So while we think lying is wrong, in situations like that, we don't really think there's any harm in it. Another example that I like to use, I think is a good one. If you're walking down the street one night and you see some woman coming along screaming and some man chases her and she darts off to the left and he comes up to you and he says, "Which way did she go?" I'd say she went to the right. You know, I'd lie to him. And then he'd go off to the right and she'd go left and get away. I don't consider that to be wrong. If you said she went to the right and she went to the left, he was trying to kill her. So it would be lying. But according to the situation, lying would be the right thing to do then. And so that's how situational ethics is applied. We do have a list of things that in general are wrong, but we have certain limited exceptions when we would consider them right, depending on the situation. There's another way to look at right and wrong, and that's called utilitarian ethics. And under the idea of utilitarian ethics, no idea is right or wrong in and of itself. It could be right or wrong depending on the outcomes of it. And see, there's no real thing wrong with killing someone. It just depends on what the outcome will be. If the outcome will be good, then you can kill someone. If the outcome will not be good, then you can't. So your actions are judged by the outcomes that your actions have. And in general, in utilitarian ethics, we consider the short-term outlook, the short-term outcome, because we do not have the ability to look down the road and see what the long-term outcomes will be. We only have limited vision down the road. Now, I'm sure that you can see the problems with this idea. You have to judge what the outcome will be before you actually do it. And it's not always possible to do that. It's often impossible to know what the long-term results of something will be. In this time last week, we talked about the situation in the Middle East. And we talked about how years and years ago, people made decisions that led up to this. And how they had no idea that what they were deciding back then was going to lead to the mess that it did. And so that's the problem. We can sometimes see short-term outcomes, like what's going to happen tomorrow, but we are not very good at predicting what's going to happen 20 or 30 or 50 years down the road. That's one of the problems with this idea of utilitarian ethics. And also, each person can set his or her own standards as to what is a good or bad outcome. A good outcome to you might be a bad outcome to somebody else. And so basically, utilitarian ethics degenerates into everyone doing as they please. There's nothing sacred. There are no absolutes. There are no lines you cannot cross. As long as you feel that what you did led to a good short-term outcome, you were justified in doing it, whatever it was. Now, in the past, our society rejected utilitarian ethics, and our society was more along the lines of situational ethics. But things have changed today. That's one of the big changes in our society today. A lot of people are unaware of that the predominant theory of ethics in our society today is utilitarian ethics. People feel justified in doing things as long as, in their opinion, it leads to a good outcome. And as we talked about, that outcome will be in the short term. The long-term outcomes are seldom considered. So that's something to keep in mind about society today. One of the big changes in society is it's gone from situational ethics to utilitarian ethics. If what I do leads to something good, in my opinion, then I'm justified in doing it. We saw that. That is exactly what we saw in 2020 with the coronavirus right there. That was utilitarian ethics at work like that. So what is Christianity's concept of ethics? Is it situational ethics? Is it utilitarian ethics? Or is it something different? For our gospel reading today, we heard Jesus say, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you not to resist an evil person. Whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also." We heard Jesus say, "You have heard it was said, you shall love your enemy, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use and persecute you." Now that has caused a lot of problems in Christianity. Ever since Jesus said it, would be my assumption on that. Now, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth comes from the books of Deuteronomy and Exodus. And that says, "Your eye shall not pity. Life shall be for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot." In other words, if this person over here kills somebody, kill him. If somebody stabs somebody in the eye and puts his eye out, put his eye out too. If somebody hurts somebody's hand, chop his hand off. That's the way it's supposed to do. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. But Jesus says not to do this. And he goes even further than that, and he says, do not resist an evil person. Flat out says it. There's no way to get around it. Jesus said that. Don't make it easy. He said, don't resist an evil person. He says, if they slap you, turn the other cheek. In other words, he's saying, make it easy for them to hit you again. Jesus says, pray for your enemies and do good to them. In the news over the past few weeks, have you ever heard that? Do good to your enemies? No, we're being told how God wants us to strike out at our enemy. So you can certainly understand why people have expended a lot of energy over the history of Christianity trying to interpret these things so that somehow or another we can make it not mean what Jesus clearly said. So let's go back to what we talked about at first. How we talked about how killing people is generally seen as wrong, but there are limited situations where killing is okay. That's situational ethics. If somebody comes busting into your house in the middle of the night and you get your gun first, you can kill them and you won't be charged with a crime. At least not in Cleveland. Now there's probably some places in the United States you would be, depending on who it was that you shot. But in Cleveland County, you won't be charged with a crime. Now, according to situational ethics, that would not be wrong from a moral standpoint either. It would be okay from a moral standpoint. But you know, really, if somebody come busting into our house in the middle of the night and I shot them, I would feel bad about it. You know, I would shoot them if they came in. But I would feel bad about doing it. I wouldn't go out and brag about it. I'd feel bad about shooting them. I'd feel bad for their family. And I will also note that I went directly against something that Jesus plainly said. I tell you not to resist an evil person. I have gone against that, but I do. There is a theory of ethics called deontological ethics. Now, the word deontological refers to what our duties and obligations to others are. And in the case of ethics, deontological means that there is a system of rules, a system of moral laws, in which some things are absolutely right in all situations, and some things are absolutely wrong in all situations. And under the idea of deontological ethics, killing someone is flat out wrong always. No matter what the situation, no matter what the circumstances, and no matter what the long-term or short-term effects are. Killing another human being is wrong. In the case of shooting somebody that comes busting in your house, it wouldn't matter. If you were protecting yourself and your family, it was still wrong. Because killing another person is absolutely wrong. That's deontological ethics. But there's another component to deontological ethics. And it says that you not only have to consider whether an action is moral or not, you also have to consider if it is the reasonable and rational thing to do. So we know that if we're laying in a bed at 3:30 and somebody busts in and the alarm goes off and I hear somebody stomping through the house, we know under deontological ethics that it's wrong morally for me to shoot them. But is it not the reasonable and rational thing to do? And deontological ethics would say, yes, it is. It's not the moral thing to do, but it's the rational and reasonable thing to do. It would not be reasonable for me to just sit there and wait for somebody to get back to our bedroom and kill us. That would not be the reasonable thing to do. It would not be rational. Somebody would say, well, was he crazy or something? Why did he let that happen? So see, that would not be the rational thing to do. So you see, the moral thing to do in any situation and the reasonable and rational thing to do in that situation may not be the same thing. And so under deontological ethics, you would choose the rational and reasonable thing to do. That's what you would do. You would not always choose the moral thing to do. You would choose the rational and reasonable thing to do. But it also goes a little farther. Because it says that when you make the choice to choose the rational and reasonable thing to do, you never forget that you also went against the moral thing to do. It might have been necessary, it might have been the rational and reasonable thing to do, but you still went against an absolute moral code. That doesn't mean you should not have done it, though. You should have done it because it was the reasonable thing to do. But you realize you've done wrong. Now I want to go back to what Jesus said. I think when Jesus said all this stuff about turning the other cheek, not resisting evil person, loving our enemies, I think Jesus was getting very close to this deontological ethics. He was telling us that there are, in fact, moral absolutes, things that are absolutely wrong to do. And it doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter what the results will be. They're wrong, absolutely wrong. Jesus is telling us not to do these things. He's saying, don't resist the evil person. Does that mean we remove from our law enforcement officers the ability to use deadly force if necessary? What would our society look like if we did that? Do we remove from our military the authority to use deadly force to defend our country? Well, if we did that, we wouldn't last very long. Do we remove from our citizens the right to defend themselves and their families in their own homes? No, because if we did that, we'd be run over. We wouldn't survive. Our society wouldn't survive. Our country wouldn't survive. Our families wouldn't survive. We would be at the mercy of lawlessness, not only through the world, but also in our own neighborhood. Is that what you think Jesus wants? Do you think Jesus wants society to degenerate into anarchy? You know, it's one thing to look this stuff on, turn the other cheek, but if you think if all this stuff were instituted, what kind of society would we live in? Somebody walks up to you in the parking lot at Walmart, they got a little gun in your hand and they say, "Give me your wallet." If I've got a gun in this pocket and a wallet in this pocket, and I reach over here and pull out a gun and shoot him right quick, I'm legally justified in doing that. Or I could just go in this pocket and give them my wallet. I still don't know they won't shoot me after I give them my wallet. They may run off, or may not. They may shoot you anyway. Or they may pull out a knife or something and stab you. So you could do what Jesus said to do in that situation, you still be taking a chance. You probably come out okay, but you may not. Expand that situation out to the national level, to the world level. If at no time we could use force to defend ourselves against people, what do you think would happen? We'd be overrun. So what do we do with what Jesus said? We can't try to wiggle out of it because he said it very plainly. There's no way to translate it out. We've got to take it seriously. Well, here's the best way I know to look at it. We realize that it is immoral to do certain things. It always is. It's never justified. But sometimes, under limited and rare circumstances, you have to do it. But you always keep in mind it's immoral. Sometimes you have to break the code of morality, but you do it rarely. And most of all, you do it humbly. Always aware that you're going against a moral absolute. From a rational and reasonable standpoint, you may have to do something, but that doesn't mean you brag about it. You try to minimize the situations where those things will be necessary. You try to avoid them if at all possible, but if you can't avoid them, you go ahead and violate morality. But you do it humbly and with a sad heart, because you know that you're involved in things you should not be involved in. But sometimes in the world we live in, we have no choice. Is that what we see in our society today? We do see people violating a lot of moral codes, but we see them do it with bravado, and bragging, and pride. I think lying, cheating, stealing, underhanded dealing, killing people are wrong. In very rare circumstances, though, we have to involve ourselves in them, but we've got to keep them in limited circumstances. And when we do it, we've got to realize we've done wrong. When we do those things, we don't try to make it like, well, I'm the good and you're the bad and I'm going to slay the dragon and all that sort of mess. We don't do that. We don't act as if we didn't do wrong. But on the other hand, we don't beat ourselves up over it either. Under the dire circumstances we were facing, we realized we had no choice, but we keep in mind we did wrong. Sometimes the rational and reasonable thing to do is wrong from a moral standpoint, but in the world we live in, sometimes we go ahead and do it because it's not rational not to. But we don't try to fool ourselves or anyone into thinking that what we did was right from a moral standpoint. We humbly realize that we did wrong. and we do it very humbly. And we renew our resolve to find more ways to keep the times when we have to do things like that at a minimum. But most of all, when we try to apply deontological ethics to things, we need to be careful that we don't use this as an excuse to justify doing anything we want.